everyone. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards episode. I'm in a good mood. There's a lot of reasons why. There's some beautiful energy happening right now, and I want to share that with you. And I got this really awesome message that came through from my team tonight. I have so many things I want to share with you. First, I want to tell you about the energies happening right now. We are in another influx of energy. The Schumann resonance, somewhere between yesterday and this morning, hit 200 hertz. I think that's the very first time in our lifetime it's done that. I could be wrong, but I think that the highest I've seen was around like 150, and that was a massive spike, and we hit 200. So the Schumann resonance is the heartbeat of the earth. The energy of the earth just shot up really high. And part of the reason why is we got a direct solar storm. We're in the middle of that. We have really strong geomagnetic energy going on. But the reason why that's exciting to me is because it's like huge Christmas presents and energy from the universe are raining down on the planet, meaning we're getting a lot of upgrades happening, right? We're getting cellular memory upgrades, DNA upgrades. We're getting consciousness raising frequencies coming in. These are all really big things. And everybody feels it in different ways. So you might be feeling the growing pains, right? Where you're stretching your frequency, you're raising it higher. And just like when the body stretches when you're young, when you're growing, that can create sort of tension or pain, but it's temporary as you stretch. So that's one thing that can happen for people. And we've talked about these symptoms many times. So they show up in lots of different ways. And then the other thing that could be happening is you could be feeling the download, be getting the ahas and the upgrades and things just kind of clicking in place for you. You could be traveling your bridge, like we talked about last week, between your human self and your higher self. You could be on that bridge, or you could be over in your higher energy because of all the influx of increased energy. So it's almost like, I'm trying to think of something like getting in an airplane and it taking you up to your higher frequency. So that's the kind of the gamut. It's a really big difference between feeling the growing pains and feeling the higher frequency. And we don't all feel it the same way at the same time. So some of us, like today I've been sort of riding the airplane up into higher energy. So I've been feeling really good, but I do have really close friends that are feeling kind of like the growing pains, the bumpier energy. We're going to feel it all, everybody, right? So what goes up must come down, and what is down will go up. So, it's important to understand that wherever you are on the frequency ride right now is perfect. There's no comparison, because everybody, acclimates differently to the energy. So that was the first message I want to share with you. It's a huge day in terms of energy, and it will continue. The Schumann resonance has gone down quite a bit, but when I'm looking at the magnetic energy, yeah, we have more coming in tomorrow. So here's one area that I tend to feel it, and I know a lot of my clients also feel it, is right here in the crown chakra. Anybody feeling this? So it kind of can feel like anything from like just an awareness of this area to intense pressure. Sometimes I get splitting headaches, kind of like an ice pick kind of feeling. We have solar storm, a pretty big one, almost an M-class flare came off the sun and was right in the line of the earth. So it was headed directly at earth. That's what's coming in right now. But if you feel that pressure up there, what my team tells me is this is like an incoming packet of energy. It's like a download is coming through. And sometimes when we're not really aware of it, it almost feels like the energy sits up here. So what I like to do is I like to tap it in, and honestly, sometimes it's the only thing that relieves that pressure. So as I tap it in, I just imagine that that information that's building up is just moving through the meridians of the body. It's moving through all the chakra points. It's going to go where it needs to go. I don't have to tell it to do anything. It already knows. I'm just kind of like opening the doors so that the energy can move through. All right, so if you're feeling that, and that's pretty common, I feel like, with the ascension, is many times there's like this direct pressure at the top of the head. Sometimes people feel it right there in the third eye. That's another place it can get stopped, and then maybe even tension at the back of the head, right in there. So that's another good place to kind of like, these are all really good places to just tap on and imagine that that energy is sort of like assimilating more into the body and kind of breaking the log jams that can happen in these areas. Oh my gosh, I can't even wait. I can't even wait to tell you about that. December 21st of this year is the official start of the age of Aquarius. It is. So I don't know if there's going to be events. A lot of people are saying they think there might be events tied to December 21st, but December 21st is huge energetically. We're going to have a stellium happen in the sign of Aquarius. A stellium means 3 or more planets in that sign, and 2 of the major planets in that sign are Jupiter and Saturn, the big beneficent planet and the malefic planet Saturn. They're both going to be in Aquarius, and they stay there for about a year. I think Saturn stays there for a year and Jupiter stays there for almost 2 years. That signifies the beginning of the age of Aquarius. Plus, there's more that's happening at that time. So I cannot wait to get deeper into that. That's definitely something that I am working with in the spirit circle. But when I get more info, I will share it with you. I had so many messages come through when this big spike of energy came. But I wrote down the one I feel like is the most potent to talk about. So let me share with you the messages that my team is bringing through about energy and about you and about the timelines, right? So there are multiple timelines happening. We know that the 2 major timelines have split and broke away. There's also variance in between, but I'm going to just talk about the 2 polarities, the positive and the negative timeline, and I'm going to talk about the energies of those right now so that we can really kind of just like understand that there are always variations. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to stick with the 2 extreme poles, okay? So the first reminder from the team is a reminder that we, each and every one of us, are all magnetic. You're a magnetic being. And you magnetize your experience to you. So this is such an important thing to keep remembering, because when we're in our little bubble of personal life, that whole idea of being a magnet and magnetizing your experience feels really strong. We're like, yeah, I get that. But when we start to expand it to include the outside world, we start to feel like we've lost a little bit of control of that, and that the outside world is now influencing us, and they just want to bring this home again. That cannot be. The outside world has no effect over you. You affect it. So we individually affect the collective. And yes, there are layers to it, right? When you start adding in people, then you're working with multiple frequencies, right? So this is where people try to break it down and they're like, yes, but I can't control others. We want to stick with what is true, that you're a magnetic being who's creating a reality, and we co-create together. They also want to remind me, they want me to add this in, that the highest frequency is the dominant frequency. The highest frequency is the dominant frequency. So wherever you are, whoever is holding the highest frequency is actually pulling others towards it. So again, magnetic. So we're each magnetic. The higher the frequency, the more magnetic you are. Whatever is holding the highest amount of frequency is kind of dragging, it's kind of pulling everything up to it. They keep showing me this idea of like a tent, right? Or a graph where you kind of see this high spike and all these lines kind of merging up to it. So it doesn't mean it brings everybody to the same frequency, but it has an effect on the lower frequency, and it only takes one individual to change the frequency of any given area. So wherever you are, whatever area you're in, and you choose to raise your frequency, you have now like set a new base frequency level for the area that you're in. And you can have quite a significant effect depending on how conscious you are of, one, the effect you have on an area, and two, how you intend to shift, right, bring your frequency out. So if you're sitting there meditating and you then shift your focus to spread that higher frequency out, you actually start to affect, it ripples out in the area around you, okay? So now what I want to talk about here are the frequencies of the different timelines. And again, I'm just going to talk about the two major extreme timelines, the highest positive timeline and the lowest negative. So let's talk about a couple of things that, let me take it back. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that when it comes to what we are experiencing, this is the area that we feel we have the least control over. So we feel like we cannot control what we experience. And to some degree, that is true. It is already something that's set in motion, if you will. It's like calling an Uber. So calling the Uber would be you setting your frequency, and whatever car comes is the frequency that matches, okay, if that makes sense. So when we're looking at just the outside world and the things we're experiencing, and we're looking at it purely from an experience level, we might notice that some days things feel really good, feels really in alignment, like everything's going the way we want. And then on another day, it seems like things have shifted and they're moving away and you don't have a hold of it. And this can cause us to move into a place of feeling like this is outside the realm of our control. We start to give up a little when we focus on purely the experience, because then we're like, well, other people are involved, or these experiences are bigger than me, and now I'm just kind of riding the coattails of whatever's happening. So what we want to do is shift our focus back to what's actually in our control. And my team gave me a little diagram I want to share with you that might help you see how much you are able to do this at any given point, especially when it feels like you've gone into a more negative area and you're conscious that you'd like to leave it and you're not sure how. First thing that they want me to talk about are the frequencies. So I'm going to start with brain, your brain frequency on the negative timeline, and then I'll talk about it on the positive timeline. So when we're in fight or flight, this is when we're in a lower frequency naturally. And we're also on the lower timeline. So we end up where our frequency is, which is why we can experience both, and we can experience them in one day, and sometimes back and forth, right? When the brain is in the negative timeline, the frequency level is beta. It's a beta brainwave. This is a stress brainwave state. And the team equates it to music. They said if you could hear what your beta brain waves sound like, they said it would sound like staccato music. So that ding, 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 like really short, ding, 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 ding. Staccato music. Sometimes it's fun to listen to, but it's a very short, rapid note, right? It has that kind of like very stressful, even feeling beat to it. On the positive timeline, when you move up in frequency, what happens in your brain is you move into the alpha brainwave state or higher. So when we go higher from alpha is that really focused but concentrated and even relaxed but focused brainwave state. When you go higher, right, you're going into things like theta brainwave, which is where you go in meditation. And then of course there's higher and higher frequencies above that where you're going into like zones of genius. Your brainwave goes into alpha or higher. It becomes relaxed, and if you could hear what that brainwave sounds like, it would sound like legato music. So la, la, la. right? It would have a like nice rolling connected energy. So that's what the brain is doing there. So now let's go to another frequency checkpoint in energies. On the negative timeline, on the lower energy timeline, we can look at the heartbeat. And what's the heartbeat doing? While your brain is in beta, your heartbeat goes into a chaotic, irregular rhythm. So they said if you could look at an EKG of an irregular heartbeat, what you would see is kind of that ragged mountain shape, right? You'd see these peaks and valleys, but they don't really have a pattern. They're erratic. When you're on the positive frequency, the higher timeline, your heartbeat becomes synchronized, okay? And it becomes a steady pattern. And if you were to see it on an EKG, you would see like bum, 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 bum. And after a while, you'd actually be able to predict what the pattern looks like. Okay, so here we have two different energy centers of the body showing us some really interesting information. We've got the negative frequencies showing us chaos, erratic patterns, and stress. And then if you move to the higher frequencies, what you start to see is a relaxed, smooth, and predictable pattern of energy. Then I want to talk about Dr. Emoto's work with water. So I'm sure you've heard that, there's a Japanese scientist who discovered the effects of language, words, thoughts, and frequencies on water, right? So he put positive words on, labeled certain vessels of water with positive words, labeled some with negative words, and he froze them and looked at them under microscopes. And I love this experiment. He has beautiful work, by the way. If you were to look at the negative frequency water crystals, what you would see are blotchy, spattered, and irregular patterns. So this matches what our heartbeat and brain would be doing in the negative timeline. And when you go and look at water under a positive or higher frequency, what you're going to see is geometric shapes, symmetry, and divine structure. So it looks like sacred geometry when you see these positive high frequency water crystals. And again, what that shows us is that there is chaos, unrest, and discord on the negative timeline. So, stuff that we get it, but it's like, let's break it down and think about it in frequency. Then when we look at the energy in the higher timeline, it's connected, it's a pattern, it's structured, and it's predictable. That's the part I want you to think about, because I'm going to take you a little bit further. All right, so when we look at the energy of the negative timeline and the positive timeline under the lens of experience, when we're looking at the energy there, the experiences on a negative timeline, and these are the things that we feel more out of control about, is chaos, stress, unrelated events. Like, for example, an unrelated event would be, so a predictable pattern or related events would be, you're hungry, you look in your fridge, you need groceries, you go to the grocery store, you buy groceries, bring them home and eat them. That's a predictable pattern. On the chaos or negative timeline, what you're going to see is unrelated events. So you're hungry, you look in the fridge, you go to the store, you buy food, you get in the car, you get in a car accident, your groceries go everywhere. Unrelated. It's like out of the blue. That's chaos right there. There's also a feeling of, there's high ups and downs. So like the raggedy mountain peaks of our EKG in the negative timeline with this sharp spikes and deep valleys. That's also part of the negative timeline frequency experience. So the overall general feeling of that negative timeline experience is unstable. It is unpredictable and unstable and almost like discordant in the fact that things don't necessarily happen in a predictable pattern. Now let's look at the higher timeline. You probably already know what I'm going to say, but let's look at it. So the experience of a higher frequency or higher timeline is synchronicity starts to happen. You start to see things synchronize together. This is when we feel like we've asked for something and we see its return, right? We see Maybe we've asked for a message from a loved one or a guide, and then we've asked for a butterfly as a messenger, and then we see butterflies, and that feels synchronistic, like it's working together. We see alignment. Everything becomes more orderly in a higher frequency timeline. We also see there's a controlled flow. So just like the heartbeat of the EKG with the bum, 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 we see that there's an orderly flow. Things are happening in a pattern, just like in the water crystals, right? There is this symmetry and this beautiful geometry and repeating patterns. This is that ordered flow. We also feel grounded, and our experience feels almost predictable and buildable. This is where, because you have alignment, synchronicity, pattern recognition all happening, this is where events feel more predictable, because you can actually see the pattern of how it's all connected. So the deep sensation on a higher frequency timeline is deep connection and things making sense. They're all connected together. So out of these things, what is it that we have control over really here? So the experience is sort of the effect of the frequency, right? So the effect part isn't really what we can control. It's the cause. It's what caused that. So going back to our brain and our heartbeat, these are the things that we actually can control. Now, usually, and especially from old paradigm or from the old training or programming we got from the old paradigm, these things seemed out of our control. But we have learned in years past here, and thanks to institutes like the Heart Math Institute, we have learned that we actually do have control over our brain wave frequencies and our heartbeat. And when we start leading those, when we start telling those where to go, our experiences move from chaotic and unstable to an energy of grounded, buildable, almost predictable, controlled flow. Yes, heart-mind coherence. So what I want to talk about here, and there are a lot of ways to get into it, but what I specifically was getting from the team was, when you find yourself in that negative frequency state, and you can notice it by your experience, things feel chaotic, they don't feel in order, I'm having really high ups and I'm crashing, I feel constantly in a state of chaos or stress, then we know that both our brain and our heart have moved into a lower frequency, into the chaos pattern. So all we have to do is move those states to change our not only our experience, but our perception of what we're experiencing. And I find that the most potent way of doing it, and the easiest, is to put your legs up the wall. So how many people do this already? How many people do legs up the wall? So you put you find a wall, you stick your butt on it, lay down, stick your butt on the wall, and you try to get your butt as close to the wall as possible. I never get it all the way on the wall for some reason, but good enough. And you put your legs up the wall. And if you can hold that for about 10 minutes, what happens is, because the heart does not have to pump the blood down to the feet and back up, right? It gets the opportunity to rest. And as all the blood is sort of moving back to the heart stops pumping so hard. And as it starts to relax, the heartbeat itself regulates. And as that regulates, then the brain starts to calm down. So things that are happening that you don't even have to change your thoughts to make happen, your body will do it for you. That's why I love legs up the wall, because when you are having a hard time changing your mind, ask your body to help. By doing that, you're calming yourself down. The heart starts beating slowly, which causes the breath to slow down. When the heart and the breath slow down, the mind switches out of beta brainwave state. It can't stay there because you're now moved into what's called parasympathetic breathing. And when the breath can slow down, the mind just goes, oh, we're not in danger anymore. I can calm down. It's this beautiful natural system. And what I love about it is that it's almost putting you upside down. And that's what we need to do with the mind. We have to flip it. We literally have to put our mind on its head and see things differently. And that starts to calm the thoughts down. It changes the perspective. You're flipping your perspective. But by doing this 10 minutes of calming your body down, you can start to move out of what I call character mode, right? You're the character in a story. You're the protagonist. You can move out of that space and move back into the observer mode where you're watching the story. And this is where the frequency of your thoughts can change, because when you stop being in the story and you start watching the story, you also go bigger picture naturally in the mind. Your mind goes to the bigger picture. And this is where events that feel random and chaotic actually start to connect. The dots connect when you're in big picture mode. You see how everything is actually working together to the point where it's almost predictable what's coming. And when people get in this place, they start to not only calm down because they can actually see what's coming. And everybody who gets in this place, they have the same general answer. It's not really about microscopic events, but about the big events that's coming. And the big event is that something really, really good is on the horizon. It's so close now. And so this, getting into that state, right, raises the frequency. Now, guess what you just did as you did all that work just laying there? You just became the highest frequency point in your vicinity. So in your living space, you've become the highest frequency point. In your neighborhood, your direct neighbors, you've become the highest frequency point, unless someone else is also doing it. In which case, you two have just merged in a way, and now you're creating an even stronger resonant field, which gets even bigger. But my point is that this beautiful act of self-awareness about where your mind is at in frequency, and the desire to shift into a higher frequency, right? So when we're in the higher frequency, we already feel good. We already are now the resonant point, and we pretty much would like to stay here as long as we can. I know I would. I like to stay here as long as I can. But this is such powerful. These are such powerful tips to use when you don't feel like you can get yourself out of it. It's like literally lay down, put your legs up the wall. That's what I do with my kids when they're in that stubborn headspace where they won't, right? They're fighting with each other. They're in a bad mood because they have to do schoolwork or something like that. When they can't get out of it, we all do the legs up the wall. And it shifts every time. It works every time. So by doing this, not only are you performing an act of service for yourself immediately and helping you get back into that place where you actually start to feel in control. Now, isn't this interesting that by stepping out of the story and becoming the observer, so it's actually letting go and detaching, you actually start to feel more in control, but not in the same way that we do in the 3D world where we have to hold on to everything. It's actually this being in this bigger aware space where you're like, oh no, I get it. I get how it's all connected. I see why we're experiencing this. I see why it's going to play out this way. Now it all makes sense. And you actually get this sense of control, because what you have is like that control of your inner world. And then you're doing an act of service for others by raising the frequency around you, right? And they may never know it was you that helped them have a better evening or a good night's sleep. But you're doing beautiful work when you take the time to help yourself with your own frequency. So I hope that, this message isn't necessarily something that's going to be like, oh, I didn't know. It's more like, just remember what you can do. Remember how powerful you are. And remember that, no state is going to stay the same forever, because the nature of the world is change, right? Change is what this game is all about. Is like we get to experience everything. And there are days where we all just feel like, you know what, I can't do it today. And that's okay too. That's okay too. But when you feel like you're ready and you need that push, this is a great little exercise to do and a reminder of what's happening in your body. And when you start to feel the synchronicity, the patterns, and the symmetry happening inside of you, then you start to see it in your experience. You start to understand it from this really big vantage point. Karma cards. Let's get into the karma cards. I can't wait to see what this message is going to be. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do pick a card with karma cards. It is a set answer, but there are 2 sets of answers, and this is how you play. So I have the planets, the signs of the zodiac, and the houses of astrology, and I've already asked my team, what is the message for this time period? And they've given me 2 sets of answers, one in red and one in blue. And the way that you play is you feel in whether you need an action related answer or an outcome related answer, which is for the time period of December 9th through the 16th of December. Okay. And the flavor of this reading, we have Uranus, which is, I call it the plot twist planet. It's a planet of surprise. It's a planet of what we have yet to have thought about even, but it also is the ruler of the age of Aquarius because it rules the sign of Aquarius. So this is interesting. It came up in the sign of Cancer, right? This is the sign of inner self, inner world, deep intuition. It also connects to your past and your beginnings, right? So usually family is connected to that as well. In the 11th house, which is ruled by, wow, I just saw that. Okay. Ruled by Aquarius. So we've got Aquarius bookending it. And I just said earlier that we're just a hair's breadth away from the actual start of the age of Aquarius, which is December 21st. But the 11th house is about friends, wishes, hopes, the future, and humanity. All right, so it's got a big energy to this one. All right, so for those who are choosing red or both, your spiritual action at this time is to stir up the situation by using your feelings for humanity's sake, okay? I feel like that's directly tied to what we were just talking about. Your feelings, right? Your feelings are your GPS system for your frequency. That's what they're there for. They tell you if you're in alignment with your higher self, where you want to go and the frequency you intend to be in, or you're out of alignment with it. That's what they do. They let you know. So it's really talking about stir up the situation by using your feelings, aka your frequency, for humanity's sake. We just talked about the fact that when you raise your own personal frequency, you immediately have an effect on the vicinity around you, and all others' frequencies will raise to be closer to yours, right? Okay. The mental action at this time, be open to new ideas about attitudes from the past about your hopes and wishes. That's a weird one. Let's say it again. Be open to new ideas about your attitudes from the past about your hopes and wishes. You know, for me, when it goes to inner world, I also feel like it can connect to inner child. Whenever I hear attitudes from the past, I go that far because our hopes and wishes as a child, regardless of the material stuff, like I want this swing set or that doll, right? Other than those, the other hopes and wishes that are in there are actually quite in alignment with your divine soul blueprint because they haven't been tampered with yet. You haven't been told no yet. So the inner child holds a lot of intel about what you came here desiring. What did you want? Right? Before someone said no to you, before the first time you got shot down, what was it? Right? Was it to travel around the world or, be friends with as many people as you could? I don't know. Whatever it is in there. It's very close to your divine soul blueprint. So some of the work they're saying that you can do right now is get in touch with that. Go find, and a way to do this that's really fun is to ask yourself questions and answer with your non-dominant hand. So your non-dominant hand is the hand of the inner child. That's why it looks so childish when we use it, right? It's got a little bit of it's a little shaky. But by using that, that's one of the ways that you can get in there and ask about, what was it? And if that doesn't work for you, then think about it this way. You want to go into a meditation and imagine meeting your inner. I know, I'm thinking about that, Tim. So then what I would do then is I would go into my imagination and I'd have the sit down talk. I'd go to where my inner child likes to play. So, for me, it was definitely the Barbies and the dolls. I liked that. I like to play people. For my son, it would be Legos, but I would imagine my child playing, and I would sit down and just talk to it. I'd put it in a space where the child felt happy and connected to the divine self, right? Because a lot of times our inner child also holds the trauma of what we didn't get, right? What we feel like we didn't get. So you need to make sure that the child is in that place where, give it the toy it likes, let it play with it, and then ask it questions. I think that's a better way to do that exercise. But ask it, what is it you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? What do you want the world to be like? What do you think the world is? All of these things from that very innocent place in us can tell us so much about the codes we came in with, the codes of light we carry. All right. The physical action at this time, invent a way to use your intuition and do it for the future. Well, that's interesting. That kind of connects with what we just talked about. But you want to invent a way to use your intuition and do it for the future. What's really interesting to me as someone who teaches intuition to others is the only thing blocking you from your intuition is there's like really only two things. It's your state, right? So the frequency you're in. Like I said, when we're in a higher frequency, we're naturally able to foresee or predict what's coming because we're in that place. But the other thing is just not believing, right? And this is something that nobody can convince you. Only you can move into the place of choosing to believe in yourself. So really what it's saying is choose a way to believe in yourself, to use your intuition and do it for the future, right? So again, the guidance this year has always been do the work on the self, always go inside. If you want to know what's real and true, go inside. That's where the answers are. That's where all answers are. And anyone on the outside, no matter how well-intentioned they are, they cannot tell you your truth. I can't do that. I cannot tell you what is true for you. All I can do is point you and go like, go in, go in there and find it out. But as far as it being given to you, the truth lies within. So invent a way to get in. If you feel like you're blocked, right, practice opening the door, practice unlocking it. Even if you feel silly, draw a picture of a door and unlock it. Tear it open so that the door opens, something. But get creative so that you can get in there and tap into your intuition so you can truly see what the future is holding for you. And I think you're going to like it, actually. Okay, so let's go to outcomes. So for those choosing blue or outcome, your spiritual outcome is an unusual example of intuition to protect freedom. I like that. An unusual example of intuition to protect freedom. Freedom being associated with the 11th house and the age of Aquarius. It's very important that we understand freedom. Freedom is our past and it's also our future. This is where we're going. Nothing that blocks freedom will be allowed to exist. especially on the higher timeline, but I kind of feel like this is like an all timelines card. So anybody attempting to block freedom, it's not going to work. Okay, an unusual example of intuition to protect freedom. I get the sense when it says an unusual example, this has to do with you getting in touch with you. And for those of you who are naturally in touch with yourself, perhaps you get a new insight. I'll tell you one of mine. I'm watching SG1 or Stargate SG1. Sorry. Stargate SG1 is a show that I've been told has a lot of disclosure in it around like the secret space program and things like that. So I've been watching it, and I had a really interesting aha from one of the episodes. I don't generally get intuitive hits off of, it's very rare for me to get them off of a TV show. So that was my personal example of getting this deep aha moment from a little segment of a TV show. That's an example of intuition to protect freedom. Well, the little aha I got, by the way, was just the fact that we create our own suffering by getting trapped in cycles of thought. These cycles of thought are also called karmic cycles. And the way out, the door, if you will, is forgiveness. That's how you get out of a karmic cycle. So whether you created the karmic cycle through an action or you jumped into one that existed, because we do that too. Forgiveness of the self and of other, specifically you, is the way out. You open the door and you get out. So, which is perfect. That's freedom right there. Okay. Mental outcome at this time. A different way of looking at attitudes from the past about associations. I feel that for those of you who feel like you've been awake for a while, I feel like you've been there. Like that's where you've been. But I do want to acknowledge that there is a fresh batch of newly awakened people. They're newly awake. And this is where you are. If you resonate with that, the idea of newly awake, okay? If you're resonating with that energy, a different way of looking at attitudes from the past about associations is pretty much where you're at right now. You're looking at the world through a whole new lens. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. You've gone down the rabbit hole and now you're in Wonderland, and everything that is isn't, and what isn't is, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of the energy for this group, and welcome. Welcome to the Freshly Awakened. We are so happy to have you here. We've been waiting for you and we're excited to see you. Okay. The physical outcome at this time, an unexpected change resulting from the history of your circle of friends. Wow. And again, that sort of feels a little bit like it speaks directly to those who feel freshly awakened. For those who feel like they've been awake for a while, right? An unexpected change resulting from the history of your circle of friends. Okay. So this is actually talking to those who feel like they've been waiting, right? You might be seeing some people that you thought you were separated from. You might have thought there is a temptation to write people off. That temptation is part of what's causing divide in the world, right? But it's a protection mechanism. You gotta write them up. So this is interesting because for those who've been holding, being awake, holding space, holding awareness, holding duality, because when you see things completely differently and yet most of the world doesn't, that causes you, the one doing that, to hold duality, right? You have to hold two timelines and live in both, like live in a state of knowing, but also live in sort of a game version of reality. And you've had to deal with being the black sheep and the rejected one and the one who is like, something's wrong with you, right? And the tide is turning a little bit, where there are some people who are going, you may have thought we're done, who are coming back around, right? Will you be able to hold that space in your heart? Because there may have been pain associated with the break in the past. And what I get here is that those who have been up the whole time, right? Our job is to hold. Our job is to hold the compassion, because we've been in both places. When you have had one perspective and then radically shift to a new perspective, you have a gift that others who only hold one perspective don't have. You have the gift of compassion because you know what it's like from the old perspective or the other one and this new one. And you also know what it's like to hold two. So you have this beautiful gift that you can use of compassion, right? What's really, what I've seen people struggle with is, you know, when you have that awareness and the compassion and you're trying to hold space and you're doing it for other people and they're not giving that back to you, right? They're not holding the space for you. They're not being compassionate to you. I was asking the team, I'm like, why, you know, like, we're being so compassionate, we're being so understanding. Why do we have to constantly be judged and criticized, right? When you see the world differently, you're constantly judged and criticized. And my team, again, with that love, but also that wisdom that they like to drop on me. And they were like, the most mature are the most compassionate. The mature one has multiple perspectives, which is one of the goals of the game here, is to get as many perspectives under your belt as you can. It's actually not as much as like finding one point in the room, as they like to call it, a room of perspectives, but actually to find out what all the perspectives are so that you can see all the puzzle pieces. That's what they tell me. But as somebody who's been holding space and holding space and holding space, and then having people finally get where you are, and instead of being able to say, see, I told you so, which isn't going to help, because it wouldn't have helped you, you're going to have to yet again have the compassion and hold the space while they adjust, right? And so it can feel really unbalanced. It can sometimes feel that unbalanced, like I'm holding so much and now you expect me to hold more. And the team, when they talked to me about that, they said, go into their shoes again, be them. What did you need? Did you need someone to criticize you, or did you need someone to be there and say, you're not alone, everything's okay, it's actually going to be better than it looks, and I understand how confusing and upsetting this can be. That's what you needed, right? And so this is your opportunity to be that person that you needed. And this is a pay it forward kind of situation, because although you might not experience that compassion or kindness from this particular person, they will give that to the next person. And the chain continues, right? And good things await you as well. So I hope all of this information gives you something, and I hope it's giving you that strength that you need. I feel really excited about this time, because as the incoming frequencies keep increasing, which they are, it spontaneously helps the awakening to happen, and more people are slowly seeing things from a different perspective, and it's timed this way, right? So just understand that if you feel like you woke up a while ago, you're like a first wave, right? Who was designed to wake up at a certain point, so that when the next wave wakes up, you're the support. And then when that other wave wakes up, they become the support, and so on and so forth. So it's a beautiful design. And when you can step into your higher frequency and see that big picture, it all makes sense. And suddenly it no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a blessing. So I hope that helps. I'm sending you guys so much love. I'm really excited about the energy that's coming in, and I can't wait to see what comes next. And I hope you have a beautiful week. I love you. Mwah. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.